Hello, my name is Wyatt Nelson, and today we are going to be doing an introduction to the immune system. Now, most people know that the immune system is that which keeps us safe from foreign invaders like bacteria and viruses, but in my opinion, the immune system really doesn't get enough credit. In, for example, works of science fiction, we see the idea of an automated defense grid or an automated defense network. And for us, that's not science fiction, that's reality. It's just that our automated defense network is biological in nature, which, in my opinion, is actually a lot cooler. But if we think of the immune system in this context as an automated defense network, it actually becomes a lot easier to conceptualize some of the broader functions and roles of the immune system. So, with that in mind, let's consider both the immune system and a hypothetical automated defense network. What would we want them to be able to do? Well, first and foremost, we would want them to be able to recognize that there is a threat. Now, mind you, this doesn't just mean recognizing the difference between all clear and something's wrong, although it definitely means that. It also means recognizing the difference between, say, friend versus foe, but that also means we have to consider the possibility, just as an example here, that our friend is compromised. So, friend, foe, or drawing friend in red here to indicate that they're compromised. I'll even draw a slash through it just to make it really clear. So, once it's recognized that something's wrong, what do we want it to be able to do? Well, obviously, we want it to be able to mobilize. We want it to be able to deal with the threat. That means figuring out where the threat is, figuring out where the defenders need to go to deal with the threat. That means signaling and alerting other defenders to come in and join the fight, and all the other things that are necessary to mount a proper defense. Now, what else do we want it to be able to do? Well, if it's a sophisticated system, which we definitely want it to be, it should be able to identify the threat. Now, by identify here, I mean two distinctly different but both very important things. I'll do a blue here, and how about a yellow here? But when I say identify, I mean that it has to be able to identify what kind of threat it is. So, is it a bacteria? Is it a virus? Is it a parasite, like a worm? Is it a fungus? Because certain things are going to be a lot more effective against, say, a bacteria than they would be against a parasitic worm. But by identification, I also mean, let's go back to the yellow here, I also mean, what is it specifically? So in blue up here, we're talking about, is it a bacteria? Is it a virus? In yellow down here, we're talking about what is the bacteria? What is the virus? What is the specific exact thing that we're dealing with here? Finally, the fourth thing that we want our system to be able to do is preparation. If the system gets attacked, if the system deals with a threat, then we definitely want that system to be able to recognize in the future that if that ever comes up again, that it's a problem. Now, you may be thinking that that sounds a lot like what's going on over here, and you'd be correct about that. So, we've got our automated defense network here. It has to recognize, it has to mobilize, it has to identify, and it has to prepare. So, let's go to our first vocabulary word of the day. Sorry for the handwriting here, or mouse writing as the case may be, is pathogen. And fortunately for our purposes, pathogens are the aforementioned foreign invaders that we need to deal with. So a pathogen is a very broad term encompassing essentially any microorganism that can cause disease. Now, mind you, that also includes things that aren't technically organisms, like viruses, but for our purposes, it'll do just fine. And here, I'm going to draw us an example pathogen. So you see that I'm drawing these little spiky bits on him, and unfortunately, or fortunately, they're not just, spiky bits to delineate that he's evil, that he's bad news. Everything, including our own cells, is going to have certain markers on its surface. These could be protein receptors, these could be signaling molecules, they could be all manner of things. But what's important is that everything of that type, so all of our cells or all of the members of this species of bacteria, are going to have them. So in this case, those are those spiky bits, and we refer to those as, there we go, it's a little messy, oops, aha, as our antigens, ANTIGENS in parentheses. And it's these surface antigens that our immune system is going to be able to target and recognize. So remember, these antigens are not a, specific, unique thing unto themselves, so to speak. They're just a function of existing. If it exists and it's on this scale, it's going to have antigens. What's the first thing the pathogen has to contend with? That would be the barriers, the wall, the force field, or in our case, the physical barriers of our skin and our mucous membranes that keep pathogens out. So draw the arrow like that. And then the physiological barriers that punish them for getting in. So that would be things like our body temperature or our stomach acid. But once they inevitably get past those barriers, they're going to hit our first real line of defense, the white blood cells, the soldiers, and the phagocytes are the very first line of defense. Just going to draw a whole bunch of them here. Now, there's a whole lot of different kinds of phagocytes, but we're just going to be focusing on phagocytes as a category. And what they're going to do is they're going to figure out that there's a problem, they're going to deal with the problem and attack it, and they're going to show that problem to the lymphocytes. Now, the difference between the phagocytes and the lymphocytes is that the lymphocytes all can only recognize one specific antigen, which you can think of like their nemesis. There's the B lymphocytes, which are eventually going to make antibodies. There's the helper T lymphocytes, which are going to essentially serve as the central intelligence and help activate the rest of the immune system. And there's the cytotoxic T cells, which are going to deal with intracellular threats. So once the phagocytes have shown the lymphocytes their nemesis, assuming they're able to find a lymphocyte who has that nemesis, they're going to differentiate into memory cells and effector cells. Memory cells are just like naive cells that have already encountered their nemesis and know for a fact that it's real. But the effector cells are the ones that are actually going to be mounting a response. In the case of the B cells, which I've drawn here, that would be the antibodies. You can think of the B cells sort of like drop ships, waiting to deploy their antibodies, which, as you can see by all these cytokines here, which are the signaling molecules, are going to tell the innate immune system, here's the problem, come deal with it. Now, if the problem is inside of a cell instead of outside of it, that's when these cytotoxic T cells are going to have to come in and deal with the problem. And they're going to do that through apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. So all of these systems, the innate system, the barriers, the antibodies, the lymphocytes, the specific system, all of it works together just like any good science fiction automated defense system. Now, the reason that the specific immune system is able to work as well as it does is because of the incredible time dependency of mounting a response. The more of these cells that there are, which there will be if they manage to find their nemesis, because that's when they're going to be propagated into these memory cells, the faster they'll be able to respond to whatever the threat is. And the longer that a pathogen stays in your system, the more it will reproduce more of itself. So it's a lot easier to fight 2 enemies than to fight 2 million enemies. And if you can find those 2 enemies before they become 2 million, then your adaptive immune system is going to neutralize the threat before it even begins. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry we couldn't go more in depth, but you know what? Maybe I'll see you next time and we can do exactly that. Goodbye.